Welcome to Security Thursday Leadership and Digital Sovereignty. This is not just about security controls or frameworks, it's about responsibility, clarity, and the decisions that shape how secure an organization really is.
Right.
And, today we are looking at something that honestly might seem a bit unexpected at first, because if you are prepping for a board meeting right now, or say managing an IT team, you might just be trying to understand why your corporate structures feel so fragmented.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle for most leaders. I mean, that friction is everywhere.
Exactly. And so today we are pulling from the work of Stephen A. Davis, specifically his writings on what he calls scanner personalities.
Right, the versatile, nonlinear thinkers.
Yeah, but I want to state our mission right up front. We are absolutely not treating the scanner personality as some quirky HR concept or a fun little personality test.
No, definitely not.
We are analyzing this through the hard, unforgiving lenses of IT security, digital sovereignty, systemic responsibility, and, well, organizational decision-making.
Which is such a necessary pivot, because when organizations discuss versatility, they usually relegate it to, like, team-building exercises.
Right, like an icebreaker.
Yeah, exactly. But if we analyze Davis's work critically here, he is arguing that this specific cognitive profile of the scanner is actually structural armor for a company.
And that brings us to the hook for today's deep dive. Why the people who seem the most erratic or maybe hard to categorize in your organization might actually be the ultimate defense against catastrophic cyber threats in the AI era.
It is a deeply counterintuitive premise. I mean, especially for anyone operating in modern enterprise security.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we were essentially trained to view nonlinear behavior as a liability, right? Like an anomaly that needs to be managed completely out of the system.
Yeah, we really are. So let's define what we are actually talking about when we say scanner personality. Because based on the source texts, these are individuals whose curiosity scans across domains, right? Rather than diving deep into just one single subject.
Right, they synthesize. They look at entirely disparate fields and recognize structural patterns, usually long before the specialists do.
So they see the connections.
Exactly. The defining characteristic really is their lack of linear progression. A visual that captures this perfectly, I think, is a web browser with 50 open tabs.
Oh man, 50 tabs. That sounds like my laptop right now.
Right, we've all been there. But imagine you see a tab on astrophysics, adjacent to a SaaS business plan, adjacent to a video on behavioral psychology.
To a traditional manager, that just looks like a severe lack of focus.
Yeah, it looks chaotic. But to the scanner, it is an interconnected ecosystem. They are looking to understand the entire board, not just a single square on the chessboard.
Which introduces the primary structural problem Davis identifies in the texts. He calls it the shoe blade, the drawer or the category.
Ah, yes, the drawer.
Because corporate systems are fundamentally built for specialists. You are the network engineer, or you are the VP of marketing. You have a neat little box on the org chart, complete with a specialized KPI and a discrete salary band.
And scanners inherently do not fit into those boxes.
Right, they just don't. And because they defy the boundaries of the silo, they are constantly misjudged by the system as, well, unclear or erratic or unfocused, simply because they don't fit that predefined label.
And Davis captures this corporate blind spot with a really profound observation. He argues that we confuse categorization with understanding.
Yes. We think because we forced an employee into a narrow job title, we automatically understand their value.
Precisely. It is an administrative convenience for human resources to make corporate complexity manageable. But in forcing that categorization, the organization actively amputates the versatile, systemic thinking that is absolutely required to survive in today's digital environment.
Wait, I don't buy that. I mean, let's look at it practically. In IT security, we absolutely need highly specialized experts.
Well, sure, specialists are...
I mean, if my network is actively being breached, I want a specialist who has spent 10 years studying packet headers, not a versatile generalist with 50 open browser tabs pondering how it all connects. Isn't a scanner just someone who lacks operational focus?
I get that.
Yeah.
That is the standard defense of the traditional corporate structure. And it holds up perfectly if you assume the breach starts and ends at the packet header.
Which, I mean, technically it does, right? That's where the data is.
But it rarely starts there from an organizational standpoint.
Right.
Yes, we absolutely need the forensic specialist to analyze the payload. I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
However, falling into the trap of over-specialization creates what Davis calls the Sicherheitslückenmensch, the human security gap.
Okay, unpack that. So the vulnerability isn't within the specialist's actual domain.
Right, it's somewhere else. Think about it. We build these towering silos of deep specialization. The brilliant network engineers are isolated in one silo, optimizing firewall rules all day. And the human resources cloud architects are in another silo, optimizing onboarding workflows. And marketing automation specialists are in a third.
Okay, so everyone is an expert in their own little kingdom.
Exactly. But what happens in the empty space between those silos? Because attackers, whether they are automated AI botnets or human ransomware syndicates, they do not care about your internal org charts.
No, they definitely don't.
They don't attack the center of the silo where your specialists are strongest. They hunt the seams between the specialized silos.
Wow, okay, I see what you're saying. So ask yourself, and I mean you, the listener, reflecting on your own organization right now. Do you have brilliant specialists who have absolutely no idea what the department next door is doing?
Most companies do.
Because that gap, that lack of shared context, is your largest attack surface.
It absolutely is. The fragmentation of knowledge is lethal. Brilliant, highly paid specialists who don't talk to each other are basically fortifying their own castles while leaving the connecting bridges completely undefended.
Let's ground this in a really concrete operational reality, because I think that helps clarify it. Say, marketing decides they need to move fast on a new campaign.
Happens all the time.
Right. So they use a corporate credit card to purchase a new SaaS tool for customer analytics. They bypass the IT procurement process completely because, well, it takes 3 months and they have a deadline on Friday.
Classic shadow IT scenario.
Exactly. Meanwhile, HR is simultaneously implementing a cloud-based payroll system because the old on-premise system is just too slow. And at the exact same time, IT is down in the basement installing a brand new web application firewall, a WAF, to protect the perimeter.
So everyone is looking strictly downward at their own chessboard square.
Yeah, just optimizing for their own departmental KPIs. What happens next?
Well, the collision course there is just inevitable. Marketing's new SaaS tool likely requires some kind of API connection back to the internal customer database, right?
Right, to pull the analytics data.
But because they bypassed IT, that API connection is unmonitored. It's likely over-permissioned. So when IT finally turns on that new web application firewall,
Boom.
yeah, boom, one of two things happens. Either the WAF blocks the undocumented API, breaking marketing's new tool and causing a massive internal political fight, or, which is actually worse, marketing demands an immediate exception to the WAF rules, punching a permanent undocumented hole in the brand new perimeter defense.
Which perfectly mirrors what we talked about in our previous deep dive back in episode 11 with the air traffic control system.
Oh, exactly. That is the perfect analogy.
You remember the visual, right? You have an air traffic control tower at a massive airport. The radar system tracking United Airlines is physically and digitally disconnected from the radar system tracking Delta.
Right, they were just isolated screens.
The specialists are staring at their individual screens, doing their jobs perfectly. But because the systems literally do not communicate, the planes are on a collision course, and the humans have to print out coordinates on paper and run across the room to figure out the holistic reality of the airspace.
And in cybersecurity, running across the room with pieces of paper is lethal because attackers move at machine speed.
So this is where systemic responsibility comes in. And really, this is where the scanner personality becomes a crucial security asset, right?
Yes, absolutely. In a company made entirely of disconnected radar screens, Davis refers to scanners as Verbindungskräfte connective tissue.
Connective tissue, I like that.
They aren't the muscle or the bone, they are the ligaments holding all these disparate parts together. They're often the only people in the room who realize the organization is a complete puzzle, not just isolated fragments.
Because their minds naturally scan across disciplines.
Right. They bridge the gap between technical reality and business logic. They understand the revenue pressure driving marketing to buy that SaaS tool, but they also understand the network topology well enough to see how that tool compromises the new firewall.
Okay, but that sounds good in theory, but what happens in reality?
What do you mean?
Well, you can't just drop a scanner into a boardroom, pat them on the back, and expect them to magically connect a firewall with the payroll system. The physical tools literally don't speak the same API language. The friction is way too high. A versatile thinker doesn't magically rewrite incompatible software just by sitting there.
No, you're right, and that is a really crucial distinction to make. The person does not replace the API. We aren't saying a scanner is going to manually hard-code a bridge between fundamentally incompatible legacy systems.
So how do they actually fix the gap?
Instead, their systemic understanding drives the leadership decision to fix the architecture.
Ah, okay. The leadership decision.
Yes. When the executive board is allocating budget, specialists advocate for their specific silos. The IT director asks for $2 million for a firewall. The HR director asks for $1 million for payroll software. If a company only listens to specialists, they just buy more isolated tools.
And the security islands just drift further and further apart.
Exactly. The scanner acts as the architectural conscience. They advocate for the painful, friction-heavy leadership decisions. Like, for example, forcing the organization to invest in Unified Threat Management, or UTM.
Right, forcing visibility across the entire enterprise rather than just buying more isolated tools.
Yes, standardizing security policies, bringing everything into a single pane of glass. Specialists often fight UTMs because it forces them out of their bespoke, customized dashboards. But the scanner sees that without it, the whole system is blind to the connective gaps.
Okay, so the scanner doesn't write the API. They change the architectural philosophy of the business. And this requirement for systemic connective thinking, it becomes exponentially more critical when we start transitioning from human silos to artificial intelligence, doesn't it?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
This is where the source material gets deeply, deeply psychological.
Yeah, let's get into that. Because Davis discusses how AI models generate this phenomenon called cognitive fluency.
Cognitive fluency is arguably one of the most seductive traps in modern corporate governance right now.
It's the psychological phenomenon where our brains equate ease of processing with accuracy.
Right, yes.
So when an AI generates a perfectly formatted, highly plausible, grammatically flawless output instantly, the brain expends almost zero energy reading it. And because it is so easy to consume, human beings subconsciously assume it must be true.
It sedates our critical thinking. The source material uses a brilliant metaphor here. It compares generative AI to a disheveled jazz improviser.
A disheveled jazz improviser. I love that image.
Right. It's this idea of an improviser who plays breathtaking scales mathematically faster than any human could, but who has never actually felt a real emotion. They do not know what the notes actually mean.
They just know statistically which note has the highest probability of sounding correct next to the previous note.
Exactly. Generative AI is pure syntax without semantics. It is advanced probability masquerading as comprehension. And when leaders interact with this perfect interface, it creates a massive vulnerability known as automation bias.
We fall in love with the interface, and we stop checking the messy reality underneath.
Yes.
The sources detail a historical analogy that I think perfectly illustrates the danger here, the danger of the perfect interface, the tragedy of Air France Flight 447.
It is such a devastating but accurate example of cognitive atrophy caused by automation.
So, just to recap for the listeners, Air France 447 was flying over the Atlantic in an incredibly advanced Airbus.
Right, a fly-by-wire system.
Exactly. And for thousands of hours, these pilots were conditioned by a perfect, frictionless autopilot interface. The machine did all the heavy lifting, abstracting the chaotic physics of aerodynamics into clean, reassuring digital displays on the glass cockpit.
The interface told them everything was fine, so their physical feel for the aircraft literally eroded over time.
But then, flying through a storm, the physical sensors on the outside of the plane, the pitot tubes that measure airspeed, they froze over with ice. And they started feeding contradictory, chaotic data into the flight computers.
And what does the autopilot do in that ambiguous situation?
It does exactly what it was programmed to do. It realized it couldn't compute the mathematical reality, so it disengaged. It transitioned from normal law to alternate law and handed manual control right back to the human pilots.
The machine essentially threw its hands up and said, "You figure it out."
Yes. But the humans were entirely unprepared. Their mental muscles had atrophied. Because they had stared at that perfect, frictionless interface for so long, they couldn't feel the chaotic physics of the plane anymore.
They lost their orientation.
Right. And in their confusion, reacting to conflicting alarms, they pulled the nose of the plane up into a stall, and they fell out of the sky.
It's tragic. The system worked perfectly until it didn't. And when it handed reality back to the humans had completely forgotten how to navigate reality.
And Davis translates this exact dynamic to corporate decision-making, doesn't he?
He does. Because today, we have leaders and executives staring at perfectly polished AI dashboards, automated risk assessments, management summaries, and they become entirely sedated by the plausibility.
They lose the feel for their own business.
Exactly. As long as the AI is handling the daily operations and giving them green check marks, they feel secure. But the moment a truly novel crisis hits a bizarre supply chain compromise or a zero-day exploit, that the AI has no historical training data for the eye, cannot compute the ambiguity.
So it hands manual control back to the C-suite.
And the C-suite crashes the company because their critical thinking muscles have atrophied. They have surrendered their cognitive authority to the machine.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second, because that assumes people behave rationally, which they don't.
Fair point.
I mean, when executives and IT teams are working 80-hour weeks, when they are drowning in operational noise and compliance mandates, cognitive convenience isn't laziness. It's a survival mechanism.
It is. Biology plays a huge part.
You're asking leaders to manually resist a tool designed specifically to relieve their stress. That breaks down under pressure, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and that is the core friction of modern leadership.
Yeah.
The pressure is immense, and the desire to offload that cognitive burden onto an algorithm is, like you said, almost biologically irresistible.
Right, you just want the green check mark so you can go to sleep.
Yes, but this is where Davis introduces the true definition of digital sovereignty from the sources, and it completely reframes the concept.
Usually when we hear digital sovereignty, we think about geopolitical infrastructure, right? European data laws, GDPR, data residency, maybe banning certain foreign apps from government devices.
Right, but geopolitical server location is just infrastructure. What Davis is talking about is cognitive geography.
Cognitive geography, that's a great term.
It is. Digital sovereignty, in the context of leadership, is the rigorous daily discipline of maintaining your independent human judgment. It is the refusal to delegate your moral and systemic responsibility to an algorithm, no matter how tired you are.
Because the AI does not go to jail if the company breaches compliance.
Exactly. The CEO does. Technology is a lever. It amplifies capability, but it cannot and must not absorb accountability. When a leader lets a machine think for them because they are stressed, they haven't purchased security, they have surrendered their sovereignty.
Which really sets up the operational climax of these concepts, I think, what the texts call the crucible of pressure and blind actionism.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
Because everything we just discussed, the fragmented silos, the seductive cognitive convenience of AI, the loss of sovereignty, it all comes to a boiling point when operational noise, revenue targets, and time constraints violently collide with security protocols.
Yes. This is where theoretical frameworks have to actually survive the brutal reality of the workplace.
So let's walk through a highly specific, real-world scenario drawn from the implications of the texts.
Okay, lay it out.
It's Friday afternoon, 4:00 p.m. The company is launching a massive new marketing campaign for the quarter. Millions of dollars in ad spend and quarterly revenue targets are riding on this single launch.
So the pressure is at its absolute peak and the margin for error is zero.
Zero. And the external marketing agency, let's call them Redline, suddenly realizes they cannot upload the massive video assets through the standard secure vendor portal. The network bandwidth throttling is too aggressive, it's just too slow. They are going to miss the launch deadline.
Panic sets in.
Complete panic. So Redline calls the VP of marketing, the VP calls the IT director, and they demand unrestricted root admin access to the content management system. Right now, just for the weekend, they say.
Oh, of course. Just for the week.
We'll revoke it and fix the portal on Monday.
We'll fix it on Monday. The famous last words of corporate IT.
Right. But this is the exact moment Davis defines as blind actionism.
Yes. Because under extreme stress, our biological hardware actually betrays our logical training. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the system. When a high-ranking leader is screaming at you about a missed revenue target, your reaction time increases, but your reflection capacity absolutely plummets.
Your ability to see the systemic consequences just vanishes. We get tunnel vision. We just want the immediate pain to stop, so we seek fast clarity.
Even if it's the wrong clarity, the sources use a fantastic metaphor here. It's like the drunk looking for his lost house keys under the streetlight.
Right, the classic joke. A police officer asks, "Did you lose them here?" And the drunk says, "No, I lost them in the dark alley across the street, but the light is much better over here."
Exactly. We optimize for immediate visibility and relief, not the actual solution. Another metaphor is the spinal reflex of pulling your hand off a hot stove.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right, it's pure biological instinct to remove yourself from the burning heat. But in your violent flinching reflex, you accidentally knock over a massive pot of boiling water onto yourself.
You caused a worse disaster just trying to escape the immediate pain, and that is blind actionism perfectly encapsulated. Granting Redline unrestricted admin access on a Friday afternoon feels like decisive leadership motion.
You remove the friction, the launch happens, the VP of marketing stops yelling, and you get to go home for the weekend. The pragmatic shortcut bypassed the immediate pain.
But it generated an immense amount of toxic security debt.
Which you will pay for later. Monday comes, new fires start, the business moves on, and nobody remembers to revoke Redline's admin access.
And then 6 months later, Redline gets phished. The attackers find the active admin credentials to your system, and they walk right through your front door. You suffer a catastrophic ransomware attack, not because your $10 million firewall failed, but because of a human behavioral decision made under extreme pressure 6 months ago. But hold on, I think you're ignoring something critically important about that scenario here.
What is missing?
The survival mechanics of corporate employment.
How do you mean?
You are suggesting that the versatile, systemic thinking employee, our scanner, should use their reflection competence, to stand up to the CEO and the VP of marketing at 4:00 p.m. on a Friday and say, no, we delay the launch, we do not grant the access.
That is their systemic responsibility to protect the organization, yes.
But if they actually do that, they get fired.
Well,
Or at best, they get labeled as a roadblock, they get sidelined from future projects, and they lose their annual bonus. Leadership is described in these sources with a lot of abstract responsibility, but with massive operational consequences for the employees trying to hold the line. If the IT director says no, the CEO just replaces them with someone who says yes.
yeah, that is an incredibly uncomfortable truth. And honestly, it is the exact reason why the source material does not offer a clean, magical resolution to this conflict.
Wait, so Davis just leaves it unresolved?
He lets that reality hang in the air because it acts as the ultimate diagnostic test of an organization. Yes, the pressure to conform, to grant the access and hit the deadline is immense. But this is exactly why cybersecurity is ultimately a test of leadership maturity.
Meaning what, exactly?
If the CEO fires the IT director for refusing to compromise the core integrity of the network, it's not just a personnel issue. The organization is essentially taking a diagnostic test, and they just failed it publicly.
Wow, yeah. They broadcasted their true risk appetite to the entire company.
Exactly. It reveals that the company values the illusion of speed over actual survival. It means the beautiful security-first posters in the break room are just lies.
The real security posture of a company is not visible in the employee handbook, or the compliance audits, or the vendor risk assessments. It is visible in how the executive team behaves when a deadline is at risk.
When a shortcut would make life easier today but create structural risk tomorrow.
If leaders punish the silence of prevention and only reward the firefighters, they are actively funding their own future destruction.
Which really forces us to look at the practical consequences of all this. We have to move from philosophizing about silos and cognitive geography to what leaders must actually do differently. The texts call this Gestalten statt Verwalten.
Shaping instead of administering.
Right. Administering is just closing the IT tickets as fast as possible to keep your head above water. It's treading water.
And shaping.
Shaping is proactively designing an environment where secure behavior is the default logical path.
And to achieve that shift from administering to shaping, we need an operational mechanism to defend that blind actionism we talked about.
Yes. And this brings us back to the consequences compass, a framework we discussed heavily in our analysis of air traffic control systems back in episode 11.
Right, the structured 3-minute pause. Before you grant that admin access to the marketing vendor, before you hit deploy on a rushed piece of code, you force yourself to run through the compass. But specifically, based on these sources, we must focus on the non-negotiable fourth question.
What is the absolute worst-case scenario?
Because if you ask that question out loud in the room with the VP of marketing at 4:00 p.m. on Friday, if you say, if we give them unmonitored root access, the worst-case scenario is they get breached this weekend, ransomware spreads through our VPN tunnel, we lose our entire customer database, we violate GDPR, and the company goes bankrupt.
Suddenly, the dopamine hit of making the VP happy evaporates.
Completely.
The 3-minute pause breaks the tunnel vision. It forces the cognitive geography back into the room. It makes the abstract, distant risk visceral and immediate.
And it perfectly illustrates the core truth about tools versus controls.
Wow.
You can buy a $10 million military-grade steel vault door. That is your tool. But if your corporate culture is so rushed, so stressed, and so aggressively focused on velocity that the employees prop that heavy door open with a $5 wooden wedge just so they can carry their coffee into the server room faster.
Then you do not have a $10 million control. You have an expensive decoration.
Right.
The true control is the human behavior.
So, what must leaders do differently starting tomorrow morning? Let's drill down into the practical takeaways from all this. First, they must stop punishing the nonlinear, versatile thinkers, the scanners.
Stop trying to force them into a neat little shoe blade.
Exactly. Do not view their endless questions and lack of silo loyalty as a lack of focus. Integrate them into your architectural planning. Let them look at the seams between your departments, because that is exactly where the attackers are looking.
Second, leaders have to fundamentally change their incentive structures. You have to reward the silence of prevention.
The silence of prevention. I really like that phrase.
It's vital. If your IT team successfully prevents a disaster by diligently auditing access logs, enforcing principle of least privilege, and properly configuring the UTM, nothing happens.
The servers stay on.
Right. No sirens ring, there is no adrenaline rush. But if a company only gives bonuses and promotions to the heroes who stay up for 48 hours fighting a ransomware fire, they are subconsciously incentivizing their staff to let fires start.
You must reward the people who quietly ensure the fire never ignites in the first place.
Absolutely.
And finally, regarding artificial intelligence and cognitive fluency. Before any employee or executive utilizes an AI-generated output, whether it's a code snippet, a risk dashboard, or a strategic summary, they must mandate 3 critical reflection questions to combat automation bias.
These are non-negotiable if you want to maintain digital sovereignty. 1. What surprises me about this output?
Okay, what surprises me?
2. Where could this system be structurally wrong?
Where is it wrong?
And 3. What crucial human context, emotional nuance, or messy reality is missing from this mathematical prediction?
Those 3 questions represent your digital sovereignty. They are the mental muscles that keep you from pulling the plane into a stall when the autopilot hands control back to you.
It requires immense discipline to pause and ask those questions when the AI has already given you an answer that looks perfectly formatted. But it is the only way to retain authority over the systems you deploy.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, highly provocative thought. Something to mull over the next time you walk into your office or log into your corporate network.
The ultimate diagnostic of an organization's true culture.
Next time your organization faces a major incident, a data leak, a compromised third-party vendor, or a full-scale ransomware scare, your first instinct will be to run a technical audit. You will want to look at the firewall logs. You will want to hunt down the tired, overworked employee who accidentally clicked the malicious phishing link so you can assign blame and terminate them.
That's always the first reflex.
Do not do that! Instead, go pull the executive meeting minutes from 6 months ago. Look for the massive project that was aggressively squeezed to hit a quarterly revenue target. Look for the Friday afternoon where a pragmatic shortcut was demanded by leadership to bypass a security protocol. Look for the exact moment a junior engineer's concern was waved away because the business just needed to move fast. That is the exact moment your perimeter was breached.
So security is not a control problem. It's a leadership decision.